Samantha Miller looked longingly at the picture in a black frame that was hanging on the wall. Unable to contain the emotional pain, she wept quietly. Half a year earlier, her beloved husband Michael died in a terrible car accident. On that fateful evening, he had lost control of the car, rammed through the bridge supports at full speed, and fell into the raging river. The car was only found 3 days later. The current at that place was particularly strong, which had significantly complicated the search. When Michael's mangled Chevrolet was retrieved from the bottom of the river, its owner's body wasn't there. Naturally, many of the search specialists assumed that the body was washed away by the current, which unfortunately widened the search area significantly. They searched for Michael's body for about a month. Having searched the bottom of the river with the radius of over several tens of miles from the place of the incident, they were still unable to find the body. There were no doubts that the young businessman had died, as his personal belongings, his briefcase, and his cell phone were found in the car. For Samantha Miller, who had just lost her mind from grief, all that had happened felt like a horrible nightmare. It seemed that if she could just open her eyes, it would all go away. Their marriage had lasted 6 years and was filled with love and understanding. Their little son Ethan was their pride and joy, and the object of their friends' and neighbors' envy. This was because the 6-year-old boy was incredibly intelligent for his age. More than anything in the world, he loved to read and already knew many of Carroll's, Kipling's, and Jack London's works. The first thing he would always do was discuss the book he just read with his father, wanting to know his opinion on it. Now, sitting in the kitchen with tears in her eyes, Samantha remembered the wonderful times before the tragedy came into her family. The times when everything was still fine and their life was planned out for years to come. Michael Miller was a successful businessman who earned it all thanks to his extraordinary intellect and determination. The man's fortune was worth 6 figures, which automatically placed him alongside some of the most successful people in New York. But after Michael's tragic death, it turned out that the money was taken out of his bank accounts not long before the horrible accident. Moreover, the young businessman didn't just sell his business to his competitors, but he also took out a high interest rate loan from the bank. The most hurtful part for Samantha was that she knew nothing about any of this, and now she couldn't believe that her husband made her and her son bankrupt. How could this be, Michael? Why did you take out all the money and sell the business? Why did you need to do this? Whispered the miserable widow and wept quietly so as to not wake her son. But the real problem started a month earlier when Samantha got a call from the bank. She was told that the due date for the loan payment had passed, and she needed to make an urgent payment in order to postpone paying back the main installment. Of course, the widow didn't have that kind of money, so she was puzzled over where to get it. The emotional pain, feelings of resentment towards her husband, fear of the unknown, everything tangled up into one ball, which turned Samantha's life into sheer hell. In addition to all of this, the woman didn't know how to tell her son that his daddy was no longer alive and that he wouldn't come back from his business trip. Now, the calls from the bank and the letters in the mail about paying off the loan had become an integral part of Samantha's life. With a lot of effort, the poor woman managed to borrow some money from her parents and sell her car, which was barely enough to make the required payment. One could only guess how much it took for the single mother, with a small child on her hands, to pull this off. One time, having left Ethan home alone with yet another book, Samantha went to the grocery store to pick up something for dinner. But when half an hour later, the woman came into the house with bags full of food, she immediately realized that something terrible had happened. Everything in the house was turned upside down. This implied that someone had been looking for something. But the worst thing was yet to come. Samantha found her son's bedroom empty. "Ethan, son, where are you?" The young mother called out, her voice trembling. But all she got in response was complete silence. which was occasionally interrupted by the ticking of the clock on the wall. At that moment, the phone rang. Tripping over all the things that were scattered on the floor, Samantha hurried to pick up the phone. The woman was surprised to hear a smarmy voice of an unknown person on the other end of the line. "Hi, Samantha. You must be surprised to be getting this call. I am not. Your husband owes me a great deal of money. 3 years have passed and I still haven't heard any news from him. But I'm not accustomed to losing my money. And so, your son will have to stay with me for now. Of course, that's until you pay me back the entire amount with interest," said the hoarse baritone on the other end of the line and hung up. Needless to say, Samantha was shocked. "Oh goodness, Michael. Even more in debt. What did you get me into?" exclaimed Samantha. Of course, she had realized by now that her husband borrowed money from some serious people who didn't see human life as anything valuable. As Samantha wasn't about to negotiate with the criminals, she headed to the nearest police station and told them everything that had happened. The officer on call sent the worried woman to Stephen Barnes, who worked at the Department of Organized Crime. Having heard Samantha's confusing story, the police officer calmed her down and promised to help. Stephen remembered the case involving the mysterious death of Michael Miller very well, and was pretty much the only one in the department who thought he could still be alive. Of course, no one listened to the young police officer at the time, and considered his hypothesis to be the product of his wild imagination. In order to help Samantha, Stephen planned a special operation for detaining the people who kidnapped little Ethan. Thankfully, everything went well and the boy was unharmed. Ethan didn't even really understand what had happened. It all felt like an adventure to him, like one of his books. The detained criminals were immediately taken into custody, as they were guilty of quite a few sins, which could get them a number of years of prison. Unfortunately, rescuing little Ethan didn't help shed any light on the strange circumstances surrounding Michael's death. 3 years flew by, during which Samantha paid off all of her husband's debts and started a new life. Of course, it was very difficult, but the poor widow had no other choice. Meanwhile, Samantha became friends with Stephen Barnes, who continued to work at the Department of Organized Crime. The two immediately took a liking to each other, and it was obvious that their friendship could turn into something much more at any point, giving them hope for true love. At some point, Samantha decided to make one of Ethan's dreams come true and take him to see the ocean, so she planned a vacation at one of Miami's resorts. Having enlisted the support of Stephen, who volunteered to come with them, the woman told the great news to her son. "Thank you, Mommy. Now I'll finally learn how to surf," shouted Ethan happily. Having chosen one of the local airlines, Samantha, together with Stephen and Ethan, flew towards their dream. Miami met the three of them with gentle sun and warm sandy beaches, washed by the powerful ocean water. Stephen, Samantha, and Ethan rode the water bikes, went diving, and simply enjoyed themselves in this paradise. The vacation flew by, and it was now time to go back to New York. Having made herself comfortable in her seat in the economy class, Samantha relaxed and tried to go to sleep. But getting some rest wasn't in the cards for her, as Ethan came up to her and lightly touched her hand. "Mom, I saw Dad in there with some woman in business class," said the boy, worried. "How could you have seen your dad, honey? You know it's impossible," objected Samantha, whose heart skipped a beat anxiously. But Ethan insisted that it was indeed his father that he saw and no one else. Looking out for Stephen, who sat in the row next to hers, Samantha asked her son to show her where his father was. To her surprise, Ethan confidently took her to the business class section, where Michael was sitting next to a long-legged beauty. Upon seeing his former wife and son, the man's face immediately changed and turned pale. Then, taking his lover by the hand, Michael tried to pretend like nothing was happening, but of course, he was unsuccessful at it. "How am I supposed to understand this, Michael? Perhaps you forgot that you still have a wife and a child who had been mourning your death all these years and had been dealing with all the financial problems caused by your disappearance. Samantha started shouting angrily. Michael tried to express genuine surprise in response to Samantha's accusations, but Stephen, who had just come up to them, didn't allow him to do so. "I am forced to contact my colleagues over in New York and Miami, Mr. Miller, in order to arrest and interrogate you. I'm sure that you've gotten a criminal conviction waiting for you for fraud and forgery," explained Stephen Barnes in a tone that didn't brook any objections. Having heard Stephen's words, Michael seemed to have become smaller at once, his face drooping. The man understood that his scam had been uncovered and that there was no point in pretending anymore. As it turned out a little later, Michael Miller purposefully staged his own death in order to run away with his mistress to live a happy new life in the South. The unfaithful husband used the loan money to purchase a home on the coast and live the life of an invincible businessman. Michael had come to New York for business numerous times, but didn't visit his family even once, nor let them know that he was around. Meanwhile, Michael Miller never once thought of the trauma that he caused his wife and son. Fortunately, thanks to Ethan's vigilance and the help of the police, as soon as they arrived in New York, the cunning swindler got what he deserved. Now he was going to serve his sentence in the federal state prison for everything he did. Samantha, her son, and Stephen returned to their hometown and began a new life, which wouldn't have any lies or secrets in it, and where mutual love and respect would become the foundation of their future family.